And on the left-hand side, that same drawing was just shown in boxes in perspective. Under that, those boxes in perspective are kind of filled in with all the lines, and now we can see the shape of the building. And underneath that is the full drawing with shading and people and landscape built in. Um, and what this picture really is meant to describe is that, everyone's journey in accessibility is going to be very different. And for some of you, you may be at that beginning stage of I'm just drawing shapes, like I'm just drawing basic shapes in perspective, and that's okay. We want to make sure that there is a spot for everyone, and that as we are continuing our journey, that we are continuing to grow, and that we're providing tools for all those different types of people out there. And we're going to be talking about the different types of people involved in doing web audits in a moment. Um, so on the screen is a photo of a group of people all looking at the Washington Monument in the background. And when we think about accessibility, this is really what accessibility is, right? In the backdrop, there are laws like the ADA. There's the updates that the DOJ recently made to Title II. Uh, there's university policies many you may have locally. But in the foreground, this is really about a diverse group of people, right? Who all have different needs. And if we take this look at accessibility a little bit further, really this is about a diverse group of people all using a diverse set of tools to access your information and being able to access that information in the same way with the same ease of access as everyone else. So on the screen is a photo of a group of architects who are all collaborating using VR software on the creation of a building. Um, and this is really meant to highlight that this is about a diverse group of people all using different types of tools. When we talk about specifically web accessibility, something that may come up often is um, the WCAG guidelines. So you may hear that word a lot, WCAG. And what that means is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And there's a group called the World Wide Web Consortium. And they're the group that basically created what are the guidelines for what are the technical specifications for what it means for content on the internet to be accessible. And I throw this out there just to let you know that those are not the only guidelines. Oftentimes those are the ones we hear most about, but they also have other guidelines on things like authoring tools and user agent accessibility guidelines. And those are things that govern things like content management systems like WordPress or your browser like Mozilla. In addition to that, they are working on the latest version, which will be 3.0. And so you may have heard some talk about 3.0, um, as well as the most recent version 2.2. But just know in the backdrop there are these other guidelines beyond WCAG. WCAG is just one of the several ones we use in terms of how we measure what is or is not accessible. And in addition to that, they've got technical specifications on things like audio and video, and that really dives deep into like what does it mean, for transcripts to be accessible or captioning to be accessible. What does it mean to have these ARIA tags, which are basically bits of code that inform a assistive technology how to interact with something. Um, and so there's a large scope of things out there which define what is accessibility. And you don't necessarily have to know the details of those things. A lot of the tools we're going to show you today, really, they do a lot of the heavy lifting to be able to identify and tell you what the error is. This is really about understanding the why and the fundamental what makes something accessible versus not accessible. And if you can understand the logic behind it, the rest of like is it this standard versus something else, like you'll see in a moment, like the tool can be able to give you a lot of that information. Um, so just a quick overview of WCAG because you're gonna see it come up a lot with assessing a website or anything for accessibility. WCAG is broken down to three main components. The first are principles, and those are these overarching tenets of their standards. And those are usually, is it perceivable? Is it operable? Is it understandable? And is it robust? And then underneath that, there are guidelines. And so you think about like that first principle of, is it perceivable? You can go, okay, well, I guess in order for something to be perceived with more than one of my senses, what exactly are we talking about, right? So we may be talking about images, we may be talking about video and audio content, we may be talking about, if I have black text on a black background, like I'm not going to be able to see that. And so all those specific things that go into like, okay, what makes something perceivable are your guidelines, and then under that, you have conformance standards. And those are the actual technical specifications for what it actually means to meet that guideline. And so we'll look at an example on the next slide. But if we think about something like color contrast, we can go, okay, well, like I can understand that there should be a category of, I can't have black on black because I'm not going to be able to see it, right? I'm not going to be able to perceive something's there. Like, what is the actual technical guideline? What's the ratio between colors that is acceptable? And that's what that conformance standard is. And so when you see a number like 1.1.1 non-text content, those numbers relate to where hierarchically it sits within WCAG. Right, so the one pertains to the first principle, the second one pertains to the first guideline, and then the third one pertains to the first conformance standard, which is non-text content. Um, so the principles we kind of already talked about, is it perceivable? Can I be able to discern that something's there, right? Is it operable? Can I actually be able to use it and interface with it? Is it understandable? Am I able to understand the information as well as how to use it? And is it robust? As technology changes, am I still going to be able to use this, whether it's on my laptop or my phone or my tablet or wherever it might be tomorrow, my smartwatch? Um, and then within that, we talked about there are these different guidelines, right? So one might be time-based media. We can go, okay, well, there should be something for audio, video. And then we have those conformance standards which define, okay, well, within audio, video, there are these audio only things. There's captioning I have to think about. There's audio descriptions. There's sign language. And the way that WCAG works is it is split up into a good, better, best model. And so each one of these conformance standards are given a grade. So good is level A. So everything needs to meet at least level A. And then better is level double A. And so in the US, the DOJ has recently put out updates to its Title II, and you can go and look at those. But it basically says for those that qualify under Title II of the ADA, the new standard in the US is WCAG 2.1 AA. And there have been other things like the refresh to the 508 that happened a couple years ago, that really point to level double A being the standard we use here in the US. Um, and then what that means is you need to meet all those standards graded level double A and level A to meet conformance. And then the last level, the best, is the level triple A. And WCAG does this, the working group who determines the grade. They did this purposefully, understanding that everyone's going to have different limitations on what they can afford to do and what they're physically capable of doing from a technology standpoint. And so they've graded this way to allow the greatest impact that countries can then decide like, okay, well, I want to conform to this because this is the lowest level I can do. But just note that like when you see like you have to conform to WCAG 2.1 level double A, what that means is version 2.1 of WCAG and every conformance standard that says level double A or lower. Um, Before we get into like the weeds of checking for accessibility, I do want to just make a note about the players involved in doing web accessibility. And what we have found is that oftentimes this is a mixture of IT developers, is a mixture of web people like are coded as webmasters, web administrators who may be, your department admin and maybe a manager. These are people who are actually putting content on the site, and contributors or non-web roles. And in most cases, there's overlap in these roles. Like these aren't clearly defined roles, and in some cases, we may have a a person local in that office who's, let's say, making an event and they've made a flyer and now they've given it to their department admin, who's their web administrator, to post on the website, right? That that person, that web admin, sometimes, in most cases, actually doesn't really have access to that source document. Their role really is to update a content management system, so something like WordPress or Drupal, where they basically have um, a web content editor. It's called a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, um, where they're basically filling out a box and they're going, okay, I'm posting this to a page. And sometimes their boss may be the ultimate decision maker, in what the website has or doesn't have, but they're not really a web developer, right? And so when we start to look at issues, there are certain things that are beyond the quote unquote webmaster for that site. In other cases, what we found is, you know, that webmaster is really, a lot lower on that level where, they're getting content, but, they're really just pushing it up to, the owner, whoever purchased, the WordPress or the Drupal site. And those webmasters really aren't IT people, right? Like, they understood enough to make a purchase on, GoDaddy, but they don't understand enough how to like edit a template or make these like system-wide changes to something. And in other cases, what we found is that there is no upper level support, right? There's just one guy who purchased, WordPress for their department, and now like they get content sometimes they're posting content, but it's really just them on their own. And in other cases, you've got this very limited support where it isn't even an IT person. It's just someone who's inherited a site. And I've run into people who have no idea who actually owns their site, and they've got multiple sites here on campus. All they have is a login that they got when you know, they started work. And so I think when we talk about this from a university standpoint, I think we also have to be mindful of all the players involved and also an understanding where the issues come from. Because a lot of cases, what we've seen is your issues are divided between things that an IT developer needs to do, and these are things like maybe fixing a template, like color contrast. These are things like ARIA issues, And on the flip side, the other set of issues are those things that are coming from contributors, people who don't even touch the website. These are people providing you with event details and event flyers and whatnot. Um, and when we look at the people, your IT developers, there aren't a lot of them, and there are a lot of web contributors. And what ends up happening is we end up trading a lot of people in the middle, right? Because they're the ones, quote unquote, in charge of my site. And so as we start to look at things in a moment, I want to put this in the backdrop of it's important for these webmasters, these web administrators to have a basic understanding of what the issues are so that they can speak intelligently on when they push things out. Because there's going to be an area of things that you can manage as a web administrator or a webmaster, and then there's going to be an area of things that you're going to need to push back to the person who created the PDF, or you're going to have to push up to your web developers, who control templates and control global style sheets. Um, and I think that's important that we recognize that this isn't a one person can do it all situation. Okay, we're gonna start with a demo. Um, and I'm not throwing shade at any type of martial art here, but I have a few different types of martial art websites up. And again, all the tools we look at are in that wiki. The first tool we're gonna look at, this is a Taekwondo page. Hold on, let me move this thing. Is this tool here is called Skip to Landmarks and Headings. So this is Chrome I'm in, and when you click on it, it's gonna visually open up the heading structure on that page. When we look at this, the first thing we see are landmarks. And these are basically regions on your page. What HTML5 introduced was the ability to systematically, just through the HTML, create sections, label out sections of this is my, my banner, this is my navigation, this is my main body, this is my main footer, this is my like side navigation. It allowed you to like really break out what are the common areas of a site and then label those things so that a user can be able to interact and navigate with that site really easily. When you see something like this, what this means is you've created a section on that site for navigation, but you haven't given it a name, right? And so now as a screen reader, if I'm looking through these areas, I'm going to see navigation, 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 and that doesn't really do me any good. And the same thing here with headings, what we've seen is we just have one heading three. Contact us. There's no level, no heading level one. There's no heading level two. And so in terms of like structure, the only navigation you've given us is a weird heading level three. Um, if you click on this, it will jump to those things on the page. The second tool that we have here is this alt text viewer. And both of these tools are really great for things for like on the spot checks of pages. And so if you're someone who just updates a page on the website and doesn't really manage the whole website as a whole, your job really is to take content and update a calendar or update like a page. These are really great spot checks to make sure that that page you're updating is indeed accessible. And when we click on it, what it's going to do is going to visually give us if there's an alt text and what that alt text is. And so um, in it, it looks like there's this icon here that says Professional World Taekwondo. Um, and the alt text is New York Martial Arts Center. So you can determine whether or not that is a good alt text for that image. But here we can see there's a bunch of these icons that are missing alt text, right? It's probably this guy here. There's a bunch of these that are missing alt text. And as we scroll down the page, we can see all of these icons here are missing alt text. Um, the same if we go to the Renzo Gracie, what we can do is we can look at the skipped navigation and we can look at not only the landmarks, so again, we can see there's a ton of navigation here and none of these have a name to it. But also we can look at the headings and go, well, does the heading structure make sense? And when we think about the heading structure, one is are things nested appropriately? So am I going from heading level one to two to three and not from like one to three? And two, does it make sense in terms of the order it's reading, right? And so in this case, when we look at this page, we can visually see that there's this section for our partners. I'm gonna close it down, and the partners is Fuji, right? You can shop for your gear at the RGA website. And then there are instructors, and it looks like these are their main instructors, right? But as we look at this heading level structure, what this reads as is these four people are in fact their partners and not part of their instructor staff, right? And so visually, we can look at this page, we can look at the order in which things are appearing in our heading structure, and we can right away go, well, there's a reading order problem. If I was a screen reader and I was just reading this down, right, without having to read word by word on my site, my first thought is, that these people are partners. This is called skip to navigation. Um, Skip to heading and navigation, I think it's called. It is on the wiki. I'll put the wiki back in the uh, the chat in case you came in after I put it in. But it's this first link here is for Chrome, um, and then the second one is called Alt Text Viewer, and the third one we're going to look at is Web Aim's color contrast checker. But that's in a moment. Um, so beyond using these tools. The other thing we can look at is for things like a skip to navigation, right? And so what we can do is we can press our tab key, and as we see when I press my tab key, let me make sure I'm in here. What it does is it goes straight to Team USA. What you're looking for is a link that appears on the screen that says skip to navigation. And I bet if I go to a tax page, they probably have it. And there we go. And so when you hit tab, it goes skip to content. That's what you're looking for. Um, and basically what that allows is if you're a screen reader user, you know, you'd have to read the entire banner. You'd have to read all of the menu for every single page. And so recognizing that pages have a common flow throughout a website, the idea is that if you click your tab button, a screen reader should be able to skip to whatever that main content is without having to read through the menu and all the things to get to that main content, much like you would visually ignore things as you're going through that page. Um, and the other thing, you can do just without even opening up any sort of like, we haven't opened up really any accessibility checking tool yet, is, if you see things like this where there's a video, you can play that video. And you can look at the captions. I'm going to turn off the sound, but I can look at the caption and I go, okay, well, it looks like the music was, in fact, like there. And I turned off the sound only because I don't want to compete with me, but like you would listen to it and make sure that um, the captions was right. Um, and this one I looked at earlier, and there's a couple giveaways whether or not this is a automated caption or if this is uh someone professionally edited this. On YouTube usually it will say like auto captioned, but in this case, like this name isn't a very common name. This Nina Kuruto Kelly. um and it looks like it tried to pick it up, and it did a fairly good job, but it isn't quite spelt right. And so one would assume if I professionally captioned this and I had a guest on, I would at least have spelled her name right. And so there's a couple giveaways to be able to tell whether or not, um, it is in fact auto captions, but you're going to want to look at it and go, well, is this mostly accurate? Like, is there large sweeping mistakes? And I got to tell you, even at Rutgers, there's sometimes that I see it, and the auto captions almost never pick up the word Rutgers right, and I have to email our communications folks, and they go, oh yeah, no, that was my bad. I'm going to fix that right now. Um, so just checking it, um, to make sure that captions and things like that are appropriate. Um, you know, the other things to look at, there's just a few other ones. You know, so on this page, this is Asana. Sometimes you end up with these like interactive content, and you see this a lot where these like little widgets. Um, just a big note on widgets. Um, Accessibility. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. They are an accessibility widget. Essentially, the premise of that is you click on this widget, it allows you to alter the page, and it makes it more usable for people with disabilities. They just underwent a massive lawsuit, and they're in like some $1 million settlement now, because of that lawsuit. But part of that lawsuit was basically, you know, putting out this statement that these quick fixes or these like tool widgets that like are claiming to make your site accessible does not in fact do that. And so, if you see these widgets or if you have a widget, like my advice, and this is not legal advice, it's just me speaking, would be to not have those widgets. I think when we look at the number of lawsuits that we've seen, there is a ton of them, but specifically focus and target sites that have these widgets. Um, that's just a side note. In this case, what I wanted to mention is sometimes you get, these interactive content, and what you want to check is to make sure that there isn't what's called a keyboard trap, right? So I can open it up and I can go, well, can I use my escape key to get out of it? In that case, I could, right? Can I use my tab key to be able to like interact with items in there? And in this case, it looks like I can. So there are things that you can interact with the website using your keyboard only to go, okay, well, is this accessible? Is someone using their keyboard only able to access this? And the last thing we're going to talk about, because we're going to look at color contrast uh, in a moment, is, as I zoom in on this page, so if I go to zoom, so the standard is 200%. Most people with low vision, especially the students we've worked with, they tend to zoom this all the way to like 300 to 400%. So anytime we check for low vision, we always go all the way up to 400%. And what we're checking for is, do things reflow? And so in this case, we can see, okay, well, the menu bar did reflow. Is there anything that's being broken on the page, right? Or is this text, like this image looks like it has gotten broken on the page? Are there tables or stuff that's gotten broken on the page? Um, that's really what you're checking for, is if I enlarge this, am I still able to access this information without anything like having overflowed the page such that I can no longer see it. Um, okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Um, so those are, if you're not technical, and if what we show you next with our automated tools become a little bit more than you're able to process, you have now a suite of tools that you can just visually do on the spot, quick checks. Um, let's look at like level two. Um, so these are using automated tools, and there's four ones that we recommend. We're going to look at three of these four today. The first is Wave by Web Aim. And this is just a plugin that's in, I think, both Firefox and Chrome at this point. FAE Accessibility Checker. The difference between this one and Wave is that FAE will allow you to download those results. And so FAE tends to be a little bit more heavier on the reporting side of things, whereas Wave tends to be a little more heavier on the overlay side. It allows you to visually see where the errors are, and it does a little bit better job of explaining what they are. Um, and then the last one we look at is DQ, and not the Axe Monitor, but they have a plugin for your browser that allows for automated manual testing. And what it does is it basically walks you through what manual testing would look like. And in some cases, you're able to perform it by taking control of your screen. And so we're going to look at those three tools. Um, Before we do that, though, when you open up Wave, you're going to see this, basically this sidebar appear. And it's going to be broken out into two main sections, right? The first section, you'll see these tabs. And so the summary page is basically just give me an overall summary of how many errors, how many contrast errors, and whatnot. We'll explain what those are in a moment. But the next tab, details, basically is uh, the detail tab is basically an explanation of what that error is. And so when we look at this in a moment, any one of these errors that you find, you can basically click a little eye icon and it's going to give you what that thing is. Um, I'm sorry, that's reference. Details are basically what those 12 errors are. Order is basically the reading order on the page, and so you can visually see how a screen reader will read something in the order that it will read it. Structure shows the hierarchy of your heading structure. And oftentimes, much like that visual tool we looked at, skip to heading and navigation, that is a great tool for understanding if things are nested appropriately, but it also will identify if there are any missing headings. So things that it believes should have been a heading, but there isn't. And the last are contrast issues, and WebAIM really is one of the best tools for identifying contrast issues. Um, let's look at the summary now. So errors are things that the tool was able to know with a good degree of certainty that these are in fact errors. I was able to discern that through the code. I was just able to discern that through other means. Like I'm pretty certain these are errors. Contrast errors are things where it looked at the code and said, based on the foreground and background, we believe this may be an error. These things need to be manually checked. Sometimes you do get false positives, and with web aim, it makes it really easy to be able to identify those false positives. If you use other tools, like if you use a an automated tool like DQX Monitor, and what that does is it basically crawls through your site, and so instead of checking page by page, it will basically go through every link, and you can set how far down you want. But it'll go to your first page and hit every link on that page and every link on that page, and it's going to give you this report. And sometimes, depending on when it checked, it may actually check your page faster than the page is able to load. And you may get a lot of false positives in some of those larger tools that are scanning and crawling through your site. And so sometimes there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to get done. But like Wave is like probably the best tool you can use in terms of like verifying your color contrast. Um, Alerts are things that it was not able to discern whether or not it was accessible, but they know that it needs to be manually checked, right? And so sometimes things is like, alt text, like there's a weird alt text here. I don't know if this is right or not. Like that's an alert. Um, Features are things that look right? But the the code says, well, this also needs a manual check. And oftentimes people look at features and go green, that means it's good, but it's not really. Like these are things that, it's great you did it. I like it would be good if we had a pair of eyes just to double check to make sure this was in fact done right. Um, Structural elements are those hierarchy things. And then ARIA, those are the accessibility tags you place in your code to influence how a screen reader or how some other sort of assistive technology tool is going to interact with that site. Um, Now we're not going to look at the ARIA stuff today. What I will say though is that the common error I see a lot with ARIA is one, overusing it, right? Like ARIA, you really want to use it as you need it. Like less is more when it comes to ARIA. And two, the way that ARIA is structured and the way that like a lot of the code is structured is that there's often like an attribute, right? Like there's often like this role where you go, this is an image, or this is a video, or this is a navigation. And then there's a label to that thing, right? And so the way that the screen reader works is usually it will announce the element type. And so it will say image, and then it will give you the metadata, the alt text of that image. And that's how ARIA wants to work. It wants to go, this is a thing, and then this is the label for that thing. This is how this thing is being told to be read. And oftentimes when people code, they're missing one or the other. They created a role, but they haven't created a label. And so when we looked at those landmarks, that's essentially what's happening. You've created this role where you've said, here's a section or here's a navigation, but you haven't given it a label to identify, okay, well, that's the equivalent to me just saying there's an image, right? Like I need to know what that image is. I need to know what that section is. Um, okay. One more slide, and then we're going to go into demo. So when we look at this workflow process, really what we're looking at is one, is it a true issue, right? We're going to validate that it is in fact an issue. This isn't a false positive. And the answer, if the answer is no, great. Just document it. That way, the next time it comes up, you don't have to do anything. If it is, the question is, can I fix it? And if that answer is no, well, then you probably need to send it to your web dev team, or you need to send it to your whoever created that piece of content. If you can't fix it, great, you're gonna fix it. So as we work through these issues on the site, we're gonna look at that's really the framework we're thinking about this. One, can I validate that this is actually an issue, and can I fix it? Um, and these tools that we're looking at, these free tools, generally they're only scanning a page, right? And so if you're only going to be able to do a page at a time, my advice would be anytime you're updating a page, definitely check it before you hit publish. But also if you're doing this as a whole, there are tools out there where you can see what are my top 5 pages, right? Because oftentimes what you're going to do is you're going to find things that are in the template that affect everything. Um, okay, 1 second. Um, okay, we're going to go back to our Renzo Gracie. Again, not throwing shame at anyone that does BJJ. Um, and we're gonna open up our Wave toolbar. And when you first open it up, it could be a little overwhelming because you have all of these overlays on your screen, and it makes it very difficult to see things. And so what we're gonna do is when we go to details, we're gonna uncheck all of these boxes. Uncheck all of these boxes. And you can see this feedback thing is right here and it's blocking things, which is a little bit of a pain. Um, and I'm going to check just my errors. I'm going to look at just my errors. And so what you're going to see is there's a graphical interface here. There's this overlay where I can see that there's an issue here. So if I just look at my page, I can be able to see, okay, there's some issues here. And if I click on the little icon, it will bring me to that actual image or that actual thing on the page so I can see where it is. So I gotta click on it or I can visually look at the page. So this says there are 7 linked images missing alt text. And so essentially this is saying, well, this graphic here doesn't have an alt text. And if I didn't know what an alt text was, I can click on this little eye. And it's going to bring me to a reference. It's going to give me why it matters. It's going to be how to fix it. And it's going to give you those guidelines, right? And so if you're working with a tech person, you're going, okay, well, here's the error. I don't need to know that 1.1.1 is non-context, is there's a missing alt text there. That's what that means. They're going to give me that information. Um, and so I can do that for each one of these. I can look at each one of these things and go, okay, missing alt text. Um, in this, you may see that there's this like grayed out icon. There's these like ones that are like solid red, and then there's a grayed out one. The grayed out ones mean that it's not visible on the screen, right? And in this case, it happens because this next button is not like it's not on the screen yet. Like I've got to click on something before it's on the screen. And so that's all that means is that the element is in the site, it's just not visible when you're looking at the site. But that doesn't make it, less important. It's just, you may have to interact with content in order to open it up and find it. And if you can't find it, like if I'm clicking on it, it's not giving me anything. What I can do is on the bottom here, there's this little thing that says code. And when I click on it, it is going to bring me to that code, right? And I can then use that to be able to determine what that is. And I can give that to my web developer to go, oh, well, there's a button here. Like I can't fix the button. Like this looks like this is a widget that was added to the site. There's not something as a content provider. It's not part of that WikiWiki editor that I can fix. Like this is the issue. This is the code, and I can be able to give that to my web dev team. And same with these form labels. There's a bunch of these forms that like there are errors for. I can be able to go, okay, well, I can't fix a form label. I may need to give that to my web developer. Um, let's look at contrast errors. Um, so uh, on the last tab, there's this thing that says contrast. Um, you could use this for any like WebAIM has like its own tool. If you search like WebAIM color contrast, the first thing that's gonna pop up is this tool, and you can use this for anything on your screen. Like this is great for like the website, but if I'm doing a PowerPoint, if I'm doing like a Word doc, and I want to check anything, I can just click this little thing, hit the eyedropper, and be able to really look at any two colors on my screen. Um, close that down. And the same is true here. As I click on this, it's going to give me this element, and I can visually see, okay, well, this is blue, this is white on blue, and I can now adjust these values until it says I've passed. And so now I know, like, okay, well, this is the color it needs to be. I can give that to my web developer. If I'm creating the site, I can adjust this blue to this gradient in order to make that pass. Um, And in terms of false positives, what I do is I tend to look at each one and I go, okay, well, this is in fact blue on white. This is in fact this gray on white. And I keep going down them just to confirm that it is rendering the two colors correctly. Um, as like I mentioned, in some cases, the ways that uh, the page is laid out, there may be layers of things on top of other layers, and it may be reading the code and going, okay, well, I'm missing that there's a black layer on top of this. Um, but like visually, I can see all of these do in fact, are in fact the colors, and these all fail. And even visually, I can see this is very small. If I unclick that, this here is extremely small, and so in terms of like just text size, this is probably also failing. I wonder if that's in here. Yeah, that is very small text. Yeah. Um, okay, so alerts are things that need to be manually checked. And so when I look at this form control, this are basically saying, well, there's a search bar, but there is no name that's associated with the search bar. So the way that like forms work or like radio buttons or any one of those things is you have an element and you have to give that element a name, right? And so it's not good enough for me to say, write the word name and then put a fillable box to say, okay, we'll enter your name here. You have to be able to, if the screen reader only hit that box, it has to know that this box is for your name. And that's what this basically means is that you have the search box, but you haven't identified or given a label to that search box for what it is. Um, these skipped heading levels, this gets into structure. And so if I look at structure, what I can see is that there is a heading level 4 here, right? So they've basically coded this as a heading level 4, probably for style reasons, and they've nested it under a heading level 2. And so what that skip structure means is, visually look at this because we believe that you missed a heading level 2, right? Like we may be mistaken here, but like it looks like you go from a 2 to a 4, and indeed you do. Like if I look at this, it goes here to here. And that's what that means. Um, suspicious link text is when it feels like you did like a click here or a read more. So in this case, like you do in fact have like a full thing of click to shop RGA gear at the Fuji Sports website. Um, and so this one, like, yeah, the click to is in there, which is probably why I flagged it, but like it is a unique link. Um, redundant links are where there is two links next to each other. And in terms of accessibility, there are some things that are more severe than others. In this case, you're going to get probably the link to Fuji, and you're going to get this link. And yes, it is redundant for a screen reader user, but in terms of like usability, it's not the worst in the world. Um, very small text means it's extremely small, and so if I enlarge this, like I've got to enlarge the page in order to see it. It's too small to visually see, and so those are things you just have to enlarge. Um, features. Okay, features again are things that you put in that may be right or may be wrong. It still needs to be manually checked. It's not good enough to go, oh, with 6 features, I don't have to worry about it. And so when I click on this, there's this logo here, and there is no alt text on this logo. Now, the program is smart enough to go, well, this logo appeared multiple times on this page. This may just be decorative, right? And this becomes a decision point, right? Like maybe you go, well, this is important. This is our logo. I put it there to say to add information. Yes, I want to alt text this. Or maybe you go, no, this really is just decorative. It doesn't add any information at all. I can leave it as an empty alt text as decorative. And the decision point there usually is, does it provide information or not? And if it is providing context on that page, you want to alt text it. If it's solely for decorative purposes, you can leave it as decorative. Um, this language thing, language is interesting. Um, browsers and whatnot have gotten better, and screen readers have gotten better to the point they're able to identify language. But in 2.1, this is still a conformance standard that you need to conform to. In other iterations, it actually got removed. Um, in this language thing, though, if you look at the code, what this is saying is when I click on this, I have two different languages on this page. And if I scroll up, I can probably see that this is coded in English. It says EN English. And somewhere else on this page, they've coded the language as just English, as just like EN. And like the tool isn't smart enough to go English and English US is basically the same language. Um, and so you get these errors sometimes like that, which are basically you just have to clean up the code. You can ignore that, and the screen reader is going to read perfectly fine. But that's what that means. And then this form label, again, it goes, well, there is a label here. There is name, colon, your email, colon, but the label that pertains to it just says name. And the instead of your name, this label just says email. And so it's going, well, there is a label, but it's different than what I'm seeing before it. I don't know if this is right or not. And again, this is something you can visually go, oh, yeah, no, this is right. We've confirmed that this is right. I don't need to fix it. And the last thing on this page is structural elements. Um, and for that, we can go again to structure, but we're also going to look at this order tab. So this order tab, basically tells you the reading order, right? And I can go 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Like for the most part, this reading order looks right. But like on this left-hand side, it's going to show me the exact reading order that this is going to give me. Um, and that's basically what it's looking at is a quick manual check to make sure that is right. And the structural things are making sure, again, that there aren't any things that are inappropriately nested, right? Like going from a 2 to a 4, and there aren't any missing headings. Because sometimes what you'll get is you'll get an empty heading that's like a space, and that again is like sloppy code, or is you're using your WikiWiki editor and you remove something, but like the thing left the space there, and so there's technically a blank heading. That's where you would see those things. Um, the last thing, Aria. Um, we're not going to go into how to fix RA mistakes. These are things though that you're going to want to give to a web developer. um you know as I mentioned, in most cases what we found is that you want to have less is more when it comes to ARIA, and when you're using it you really want to make sure you're checking the specs to make sure you have a role and a label. And so in this case there's a lot of these controls. They've done a lot of these ARIA things, which is why it's going, well, you need to check all this ARIA to make sure it's right. Um, okay, I want to look at another tool. I'm going to close this one down, um, close Wave, and we're going to look at the AI Inspector. Um, so AI Inspector is just another tool that you can use. But what this does is it allows you to export this data. And so if you're someone that prefers to just work off a spreadsheet instead of having something like more visual, you can use this. And so if I wanted to click on, let's say, images, I can click and I can drill down, right? And I can go, okay, well, it looks like there's this image here. This is SVG element that failed, and I can click, and it should in fact highlight what you're doing. Let me find another one. Make sure it highlights right. Um, yeah. And so what it'll do is much like the other one, it will like highlight where it is on the page, but like on the bottom here where it says export data, you can go to a screen. So if I just wanted to pull up color contrast issues, I can export all of those and it will download it as a an Excel sheet. And I'll show you what that looks like. 1 second, presentations. I have it here, so we don't have to wait for it to download. Move it to the screen. What it will do is it will basically download that item. Um, and then you can give this to your whoever you need to give it to, and it will give you the exact class where it is. It'll give you the exact page that it is. this isn't as easy to read though. Like we're starting to get into that territory where like, okay, well now I kind of have to understand how HTML works to understand how to read this. Um, but if you had certain items that you want to send off, this is a great way of just downloading the Excel spreadsheet and go, hey, web dev, I can't fix these ARIA issues. Here are the ones that popped up in an AI tool. Um, that's the FAE checker. Um, Wait, one more I'm going to look at. Before we do, I think we go back to our PowerPoint. Um, We did that. We did that. Um, okay, so this is just a note that, as you're going through your site, there are a ton of free sites that let you check your domains to be able to pull out what are your top 5 pages. And this is really just to emphasize that, those tools, basically what it's doing, it is checking a page, right? And so you're checking a page at a time. The next tool I'm going to show you does some crawling and it does some it automates some of the manual checks. And so we're going to look at that right now. This is the last tool we're going to look at. Was it this one? Is that Chrome? So let's go back to Renzo Gracie. Let's go back. So Axe DQ has got a tool, but to find it, you have to go into, I did that really quickly, sorry, into more tools and then your developer tools. Of course, because I did twice, it closed. Um, and then if you scroll through your developer tools, you'll see Axe Dev Tools. Now, they have a free version of this that like anyone can use. And what it does is it'll either do a full page scan, or you can like just do a partial page scan. If I go, well, I only updated this part, I want to do a partial page scan, I can do that. But what it also has is these intelligent guided tests, right? And so if there's a table and you go, oh, well, I just really want to make sure that my table is accessible, I can click on this and it will basically go through those tables, right? Or if I want to just check images, I can go through a guided test to check images. And so in this case, we're going to go through a keyboard test and it's going to take control of my computer. So 1 second, I'm going to click on it. It's going to say it's starting to analyze my page. Let me put this to the top. Hold on. It's going to do the thing. And it goes, let's get started. I'm going to hit start. And it's going to start running through the page. So it's going to say performing the test. I have 7 tabs stopped. And so you can see I'm not doing that. It's going through my page like a stalker, and it's just kind of going through all the things on its own. Um, and there's a lot of links on this. I probably should have picked a smaller page. But what it's going to do is it's going to tab through everything, and then it's going to check for any issues it found along the way. And you see there are 4 things that it's looking for. One is capturing the tab sequence to make sure nothing's forgotten. 2 is detecting potential keyboard traps. Analyzing focus indication. So like as you click on it, was there a box that appeared, like that blue box there, indicating like visually where you are on the page, and is assessing the roles and accessibility names of those tab stops. So are they coded correctly? Um, so it's made 95 stops. Um, Click next to continue, and it's gonna walk you through a whole widget. Oh, we have 4 minutes left. So it's gonna walk you through a widget. Um, this can be paid for. There is a free version though. So there's a lightweight version, and then there's a free version. Sorry, then there's a paid for version. The paid for version will connect to your larger Axe monitor tool. The free version doesn't, but it does allow you a lot of the same functionality. Um, okay, so we're not going to look at this report, but if you keep going through that, it will give you a report. There is a couple other things on the slide I want to show, and that really is just to showcase that there are tools like that that are out there that's quasi-free. Um, that one is called Axe Lighthouse. Nope, Axe Dev Tools. I believe that's in the wiki as well. If not, I'll update the wiki. Where am I? This one. Okay. I 3 more minutes. I just want to cover something real quick. So when we think about like coming up with a plan for your website, um, risk is basically probability times impact, right? It's what is the odds that something's going to happen times like what are the actual results of that happening, right? It's basically cause times effect. And in most cases, there's an event and then there are consequences, right? And so in this case, right, let's say you woke up late, you started speeding, you get into a car crash and then you get hurt, right? So the event itself is you were speeding, and then you as a result you got into a car crash, and the results of that is you got hurt. And so the goal of any risk management plan is really how do I minimize the amount of times or the instance of that event happening. In this case, how do I stop people from speeding? And then two, how do I mitigate the consequences of that, which is, how do I reduce the amount of hurt that you're going to get? And so, for safety, people put up stop signs, right? And that deters people from speeding because now you're breaking the law, but also it stops you and prevents you from going a certain speed over a certain distance, right? And to mitigate the results of you getting into a crash from speeding, we implement airbags, right? And so there are these things we're putting on both sides of that coin, to ultimately stop people from dying in car accidents. When we look at the risk of like our websites and looking at all this Title II stuff, right? We can say, well, the event here is we've launched a site, and the consequences is now, well, we launched an inaccessible site, and the consequences are really now there's someone out there that can't use it because it's inaccessible, which then leads to an OCR complaint. Um, and so while the little risk is that we look at, the little goal is how do we stop these complaints, right? How do we prevent complaints? But the bigger goal is how do we make sure everything's accessible, right? And so really you reduce risk by reducing any one of those two sides. But the overall goal is really to reduce the first side of, well, we don't want aimless being to begin with, right? We don't want any inaccessible sites to start off with. And so when we develop a plan, really we're looking at how we're balancing this risk. And we're looking at from the point of can we put as many things before the user hits this site as possible. And those are things like, we've come up with a request process so that everyone, not anyone can just build their own site here at Rutgers. Like you now have to go through a process to get approved for a site. Sorry, some of these things aren't the order is right. We've implemented a university-wide policy and we've updated that. We do now reviews. It's a step in our process that before a site gets launched, someone needs to review it for accessibility. It needs to meet a certain standard before it can be launched. And even after it's launched, we do monthly site audits, right? We do cohorts of about 20 and we just do these in groups so that it's a learning opportunity. But we also have this Aloha project where we basically compile a list of everything as a student you're going to use for the moment you say hello to us, the moment you say goodbye, everything a faculty staff members has to use for the moment they say hello to the moment they say goodbye. And we basically go through that proactively. And so we have all these steps in between before a user will hit that site, hopefully to improve our accessibility. And then if they do run into an error, we have a barrier submission, right? And if your university does not have one, I strongly suggest you include that on the bottom of your web pages to say, if you run into an issue with this site, please contact so and so that there could be steps to resolve that issue quickly and mitigate the consequences of that user not being able to use it. Um, that is it. We are 1 minute over time. I feel like we just squeezed it in to be out on time. There is one question. Are you ready behind you? Let's talk offline. I don't know. Um, if there's any questions at all, you can feel free to email me. I'm sorry we went over time. But that is all I have. I know that was a lot. Are there any I can stick around. Are there any questions anyone has? I can stick around for like 2 minutes because I do have another meeting.
And I don't know if you can hear me. This is Laura Brenner, Scotty with Thomas Edison State University. What is the best way to contact you?
I'll put my email in the chat right now. It is jcurdan at rutgers.edu. I think I spelled that right. Yes.
tried to click on the site that you gave, that you put in the chat for the previous presentations. And I don't know if I did something wrong, but it didn't open. So I just want to make sure https://bit.ly/blog touch. Um,
Oh, Naomi, I think that's you. I think the shortened URL maybe didn't work. Oh no, it came. I'll put the whole site link in the chat.
something wrong.
This is it here.
It said it didn't match any documents when I tried it.
I just put that in the chat. That should be the full URL.
This is gosh, totally
Okay.
over my head most of the time, but the way you present is outstanding.
Well,
And
thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
glad there's somebody else from the university who probably understands everything on this call. Um,
Well,
thank
well,
you, and
thank
thank
you.
you and everybody else. My goodness.
All right, well, thank you all. I've got to jump, but thank you guys for coming. We will send out the recording afterwards, and I'll work with Naomi to make sure the PowerPoint and other things get sent out. Thank you guys. Thank you, Naomi. Hello, Jesse.